Welcome everyone to Avalara product updates for partners and customers. This is our second edition. We had a first one in Q4 and this is our first one in Q1. And I wanted to just start off with our kind of housekeeping and legalese that we need to show you, and just take a moment to read that. And as you're getting acquainted with the console, you have some resources that you can have, I think, on your right-hand side that you can download after the fact or during the webinar to reference. I know there's certain things there that will be valuable. And we also will be uploading this webinar to our YouTube channel, and it'll be part of an ongoing playlist, so you can always reference back to certain sections of this presentation as you want. And now that we're moving on, let me just talk high level about the agenda. As I said on the first one, our mission about this is to inform you, the partners, to better serve your customers via Avalara. We want to keep you up to date on all our product updates, features, and functionality, and everything coming out, so you can foresee and sell to your customers the best to your ability. Now, today we'll be talking a few things. I'm going to go through an overview of the Forrester snapshot. I know some of you may have seen that on LinkedIn in different areas. I'll just give a couple of things in a snapshot in regards to where you can download it and get the infographic. Chris will be giving the NetSuite e-invoicing live reporting update. We all know that we heard that announcement at Suite World, where we kind of stand today, and then also the enablement coming. We'll have an SAP integration overview, as well as the S/4HANA functionality that everybody's interested in. And then we'll close it out with a Microsoft Dynamics and NetSuite One World accounts payable integration update and what's live in that today. And let's go. And every webinar, I like to level set in this in regards to our partner ecosystem. And you know, Avalara runs on partners, and without our partners, you know, Avalara wouldn't be here. And so that's ultimately our mission, is to keep you guys updated and keep the communication coming to you in a more streamlined fashion. And now let me introduce our speakers today. Like I said, Chris Generalis he is the SPM, the Strategic Partner Manager of NetSuite. He'll be giving us a NetSuite ELR update. We'll also be hearing from Greg and Frank in regards to the SAP integration update, as well as an S/4HANA AP update. Frank will be helping with the technical questions. And you'll see Angela Goldsmith there. She is actually in big room planning right now. So Logan McKnight, who you heard from last quarter, will also be filling in for her. But if you have any questions, we'll make sure we'll get them to the team and get them all answered. And I'm your host, Scott Soini. I sit in the product marketing side. I focus on the developer product marketing, and I have a team that works within the partner integrations on the product side. And I'm firstly going to kind of give you a Forrester snapshot of the Forrester TI report that came out about a month ago. What I wanted to say is we did basically we commissioned Forrester, a third-party company, to do a report, and they interviewed about 6 customers of ours. And then what they do is they come up with a fictional company and basically show how Avalara helps streamline the amount of hours they save in the ROI. And in this study, basically the fictional company has a $300 million in annual revenue, about 10,000 transactions per year, 4,000 tax returns, and they're also using AvaTax returns and ATR. And you can see on the screen, I don't need to read them all to you, but these are the highlights and the quantifiable things that you can use to also sell to your customers when you're selling Avalara. This is a third-party, reputable third-party Forrester saying this, and you can use these types of things to better get your prospect or client over the line in buying Avalara and getting that referral fee. So that is, the big ones that are key are avoiding about 510 hours annually on managing and streamlining returns. You also get an ROI of 153%, and you also make the payback period in that time frame with that company is about 6 months. So I know some people have smaller companies, some may have larger, And one thing I wanted to kind of tell you too is, and by about the end of April, we'll have a TI sales calculator that you can work with your SAM or SE and actually be able to do that full calculator on a specific company if that's needed to give to your prospect or your customer. But if you have any questions, there's a link in there and we're happy to answer any of them. You have a quick link to the infographic that will show you this information. And then you can download the whole 52-page report if you're interested. Either way is obviously up to you. Now let's kick it off, and I'll hand it over to Chris, and he'll be giving a NetSuite ELR update. Take it away, Chris.
All right, Scott, thank you so much. So the next couple of slides are going to totally focus on what we're doing with NetSuite in the area of e-invoicing, but I always find it helpful to kind of orient myself and orient the audience into like how does this fit into the overall picture for Avalara? So we have, as partners, you already know that we have a portfolio of products that cover the entire life cycle, like all the way from VAT registration to classification through tax and VAT determination. And the piece that we're going to talk about now, which is like the sending and receiving and creation of e-invoices. And then at the end of the life cycle is the submission of returns. So back in end of 2020, beginning of 2021, Avalara acquired a company called Imposia that was one of the leaders in the e-invoicing space. So that's how we really catapulted ourselves to this first bullet point, which is having those advanced e-invoicing capabilities. That's really sort of your table stakes, if you will. Now, one thing I will say, just to give you a heads up, when we release the NetSuite e-invoicing product here in just a couple of weeks, we will not have all of the mandates covered. We will be, just like most software development projects, we're going to have several waves of mandates, hoping to be at parity or beyond by the end of the year. So we're going to take a very measured approach, and our waves will be prioritized, as you'll see in some of the subsequent slides. So you have to have sort of a baseline of e-invoicing capabilities, and the next couple of slides will highlight some more of that. The solution that we will be bringing forth with NetSuite will cover lots of countries. And while that sounds very obvious, when you look at each of the countries, the mandates are very specific. It's not like it's a binary, you either do e-invoicing or you don't. There's a lot of nuance that's involved, and we'll cover some of that. I think perhaps the biggest differentiation, though, and one in which it's a real advantage for Avalara and NetSuite, is the way that this product will be consumed. So it is an embedded experience. It's all delivered through one API. It is consumed in the context of the NetSuite UI. So it's not like you have to go to separate screens to do different pieces. So it's a really it's a sexy product. And I kind of covered this last bullet point at the outset, which is that Avalara is a one-stop shop for your global compliance needs, which just lessens the need for a whole bunch of ancillary products. So moving on, you got to have an up and to the right slide, right? So this is that one. So as you know, more and more governments around the world are turning to e-invoicing and live reporting as mandates. So these it's been moving in this direction for years. I think the slope of this line on the slide is actually pretty understated because to date, many of the governments have been having an optional period for companies to comply with e-invoicing. It is very quickly going to be mandated, which means there's going to be penalties associated with that. So the days of having just PDFs or paper invoices are out the window. So even with paper invoices, they're going to need to be machine readable with QR codes and things like that. So our solution covers all of that. And the final note, you'll see sort of on the right side of the slide, there's a bunch of drivers and why we're going to get lots of traction around e-invoicing. I think it comes down to like a very basic carrot and stick, right? The stick is the fact that you're going to have the government's enforcing penalties and mandating these things. But on the carrot side, you have enhanced reporting. There's less fraud, much more efficient audit checks, higher security, better speed, tons of automation. Like there's a whole bunch of benefits that you guys as partners can bring to your existing base and prospects. So moving on, I look at this slide. I promise you I will not read you this slide. The intent here is to let you know this is complicated. So I'm going to highlight three things here. So the first thing that is kind of surprising is e-invoicing has been around for quite a long time, like talking about 2 decades. And one thing that surprised me personally is that Brazil, who you typically wouldn't think of as like a real leader and innovator in the technology space, was exactly that. They were one of the first major countries to adopt and promote e-invoicing, and it really caught on in the Latin American countries, as you can see here on the left side of this slide. Italy, similarly, was one of the first to help gain traction in the European countries. You'll also see on this slide that it's like I was saying earlier, it's not like super binary. Like you might see that, Portugal started, years and years ago with, the mandating the use of certified software. And then the following year, they it had QR codes as the mandate. And then there's, more stuff coming down the line. So it is not like a switch, like, Poland turns it on or Poland turns it off. It's there are different levels to this, and there's also different rails that I think there's not one standard, right? So in Europe it's PEPL, in China it's something different. So you need to make sure that you're selecting a provider that has very broad and global coverage. The last thing that I will say about this slide before moving on is that it is helping to inform the roadmap that we are working with NetSuite on in terms of all the mandates. So, we will start with a handful of important countries, and then based on things like, when penalties will incur and the traction that NetSuite has in a particular region, we will prioritize those to make sure we have a very sensible roadmap that moving forward. So finally, we'll go to the why should you care slide. So it's very clear that lots of customers are going to be raising their hands and inquiring about e-invoicing, right? It's not a matter of should I do this? It's when you will need to do this, particularly if you are doing business across borders. This is the only solution that is going to be sold by NetSuite. It's the only solution that is going to be consumed right in the context of the NetSuite UI. So it is a NetSuite product. It has a bright orange engine that is powering it on the back end, but it's a NetSuite product sold on NetSuite paper. So if you are a NetSuite partner, that is how you are going to participate in the commercial part of things. And then NetSuite will be announcing their program and how it will work in just a few weeks. As I said, the product is still in development. We're doing end-to-end testing at the moment. Will be launched hopefully here in the beginning of April. Let's see if there's anything that I didn't cover. Yeah, so a lot of people will be raising their hands. This is a great way for partners to get ramped up on e-invoicing, and for those customers that are on NetSuite, this is a wonderful, sexy way to consume the functionality right in the context of the ERP. So with that, I am going to pass it over to the SAP team.
Hi, my name is Greg Pollock. Thank you guys all for joining. And Frank and I are going to talk to you guys today about the new SAP connectors that are coming out this year for SAP and the new technology basically that they're built on. And so for those, and a lot of partners haven't heard of this yet or are unfamiliar with it, SAP is moving are trying to push a lot of customizations through a new platform that's called BTP. And BTP is just an acronym for Business Technology Platform, which allows developers to customize SAP for their companies or customers without actually modifying core SAP. So it is for lack of a better, for easier discussion, it's kind of a standalone system that your SAP platforms will call out to. And the reason why for this push from SAP is historically, SAP is a mile wide and a mile deep. And, integration partners in the past have, for lack of a word, we'll call it bastardized SAP, of doing customizations to no end, because they could or because it was the business need. But what happens is when you try to migrate to a newer instance of SAP or go to, say, the cloud, it's very, very hard to migrate that level of customization up. So SAP introduced this platform to try to limit the amount of customizations that customers are doing within their core system, and using this platform to allow for that type of customization and integrations and AI. So that being said, Avalara this year is releasing all new connectors that are going to be utilizing BTP that will work for ECC, SAP S/4HANA on-premise, and the S/4HANA private cloud instance. So those are all scheduled to be released at the end of H1 or the beginning of, which is the first half of the year, or the early part of the second half or third quarter. So our SAP solution utilizing this will fully automate with AvaTax to do state and local tax rules and rates. You don't have to do any kind of table maintenance. It does address validation. You'll be able to do consumers use tax, which is new for these connectors and for Avalara, to have that functionality within the AvaTax engine versus a separate module. You'll be able to do exemption certificate management and returns preparation and filing. So the BTP allows customers to still customize their SAP solution, but they're just not going to be doing it as much within core SAP or in the HANA instance or ECC. And again, this is to allow or to keep that core ERP package as clean as possible, that'll allow future enhancements much more easily. And so for those that are familiar with SAP historically, I'll use an example of when they went from Enhanced Pack 6 to 7. It was a big change that a lot of the customizations that companies had done prior to that release weren't compatible with the future Service Pack update. So this was a kind of a lesson learned, and as SAP is trying to get more and more companies to move to the cloud, the fear would be all these customizations will limit customers' availability to do that. And when you move to the cloud, you want to keep that as clean as possible, especially if then you try to go to a public instance where you have very, very limited options to do any kind of customization. So it's kind of training companies for the future is to try to move their customizations out of the ERP. And again, you can still do customizations. It's still going to make all of the tax calls to SAP, to AvaTax or the tax engine to make those tax calculations and report them back. And I'm going to let Frank speak to this if anyone has any kind of questions on the technology piece of this or how this works. And one of the biggest differences for those familiar with SAP is The new connectors use a tax service call instead of the legacy remote function call or RFC calls in the US and Canada. And so the VAT calls used a different technology. And so our new One World connector will use tax service calls for US, Canada, and VAT countries. So it allows for a single connector within all countries. So that is one of the biggest changes. As we mentioned before, the benefits of having a BTP-based integration is going to keep your SAP digital core as clean as possible. It's not possible within any SAP implementation that needs to call an external tax engine. There is some customizations and modifications needed. Avalara's solution it honors the clean core philosophy to the greatest extent it can, but obviously, like I said, there's some minor adjustments that have to be made within SAP to allow for the tax call. Our solution fully aligns with SAP's BTP strategy. It allows for a single integration point for all of SAP. It's the safest place to do those modifications that you need for customizing for your customers. And that also allows us to co-innovate with other SAP customers and having a common tools and language for that. So in doing this, it increases your productivity, reduces the cost of changing IT spend, reduces the time to deploy, and it improves your overall operational efficiency, which is great as an implementation partner or a customer. And some of the cool things that are in these new connectors that are coming out is new functionality that we did not have in our legacy connector for SAP. And one of the interesting tools that comes up, or helpful tools, is this Flex Mapper tool. And in the past, if you wanted to pass additional data elements that were not in the standard tax call, you would have to have a developer go in and create custom ABAP coding. And ABAP coding, for non-SAP familiar folks, is just ABAP is the language of SAP that it's written in. And what that Flex Mapper tool allows you to do is you don't have to have a developer write code to pass the data. So if you want to pass an additional data element, we've enabled 50 user-defined fields, both at the header and the line item level. So you can pass almost unlimited data over as part of your tax calculation. The mappings are available by both accounts payable, accounts receivable, and then any FI invoice documents as well. So you can map custom to each one of those different document areas. You can map multiple data elements to that same field based on a user hierarchy. So, for example, if your company uses material group instead of material number, you could map that says, or inconsistently, you could say pass material number. If material number is not available, pass material group or product hierarchy within that same field. And it's going to look and find which value or is available to satisfy that. Also easily allows users to include or exclude leading zeros that are a pain in SAP for data, because SAP tends to use fixed field lengths. So if it's a 10-character field and you're passing a 1-character number, it may pass nine leading zeros there that you may want to strip out. You can also pick data within a field. So if you want to pass the 3rd character or characters 3 through 5 instead of the entire field, you can do that. A lot of times that is because companies will set up information within data that may have, say, the 1st character in that field relates to this, the second 3 is something different. And so you don't need to pass the entire data string over if you only need parts of it. It also allows you to concatenate values within a specific field. So for example, if you wanted to pass cost center and general ledger account mashed into one field, it will allow you to do that. And then you can also hard code values passed in the data field. So it's very, very flexible. It allows the user to do this using dropdowns to select the values to pass in those fields. And again, the biggest time saver of this is it does not require then you having to engage a developer to write custom code for that, which is very, very fun. The other thing that's in these new connectors is a logging tool. And so rather than having to go out to a tax engine to find any of the logs that relate to your transaction, the connector creates 4 different logs for that same transaction so that you can see the call from SAP, then you can see what's received by the tax engine, then you can see what's sent by the tax engine and what's received by SAP. So you can see all legs of the transaction. And it separates that out by document number. So for those familiar with the tax engine, typically you have to go find a gigantic data file for a log that includes every transaction that's occurred over a specific period, and you have to hunt and find your data. This is nice because it automatically sets this aside by document number. It also shows you preliminary calls. So before the document is posted, the tax engine receives calls, say for a purchase order. As you're creating the purchase order, it's making tax calls to estimate the tax, but it hasn't recorded a purchase order number. You can find that in the logs way easier than you can with our competitors' logging functionality. You can also search the logs by a specific user ID, a date range, a document number, even the line item, or the SAP transaction code. So it's very, very, very flexible. For our integrators, it's great because it makes checking transactions really easily. And then for customers who aren't really that familiar with pulling transactional logs or don't know how to do it, it's very easy, and they don't have to hunt very much to find the transaction that they want to send, say, their implementer if they have a question, or to the tax engine, to Avalara, if they have a question on the transaction, saying, why am I not getting the tax that I think I'm supposed to be getting? So it's a great innovation there as well. And then finally, we have an accounts payable solution now, where in the past, the Avalara Accounts Payable solution was a batch program only done after after the fact the transaction was done. It was a standalone process in a separate module, standalone module from AvaTax. So that functionality has now been brought into AvaTax. I know that you guys or attendees may have seen a presentation on AvaTax for Accounts Payable last month, so I won't go too much into it as far as that functionality. But the nice part is now with this new connector and the new enhanced functionality for the Accounts Payable solution, you can make real-time use tax calls from the ERP. And it'll do this for any ERP, not just specifically SAP, but I'm here to talk about the SAP part. So what this allows you to do is if you process, say, an accounts payable transaction where the vendor undercharged you some amount of tax, like they may have charged you just the Colorado tax and not Colorado and City of Denver. If you have to accrue on the City of Denver tax, it will tell you the adjustment, it will bring it back, post it to the original document so you have matching, and then settle that transaction. It'll pay the vendor what the tax that they billed you, and then accrue that incremental City of Denver tax if you need to remit it. So the beauty of that is matching, right? So if you're used to doing use tax manually after the fact, your company or your customers may have done this like on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, where they'll do a manual review of use tax, create a manual adjustment, post it, and then it'll go back to the job or the cost center of whoever originally purchased this. The problem with that is the approver of that invoice is now getting a charge, several periods or potentially after that invoice was settled. That's just the tax. They're going to question, what is this? Why am I getting it? And a lot of times also, as well as that job or the cost center or object that was being charged to may be closed. If it was a project that's closed, you're now trying to put use tax into something or to a project or a cost center that's no longer available to post that tax to. So the beauty of this is it allows it in real time, posts on the original document, so it's very traceable, not only internally, but when you get audited, the vendor, the state can find out, hey, you paid $10 to Denver, to Colorado, but you still owe the Denver tax, and they can see, oh, you paid it, and it's all within that same transaction. So it makes it very, very easy, not only to comply with your use tax obligation, but defend any kind of purchasing audits by a jurisdiction. And that's going to be available in any of the integrations we have for SAP that are going to be using BTP, so any of the new One World connectors. So that is a tool that's going to be coming out as well. With that, I will turn that over for our discussion on D365 and NetSuite One World.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. You're up. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I started hearing a little static, so hopefully that's just won't affect me. All right, so we are going to talk about, it's a very good segue into the AvaTax for Account Payable for specifically Business Central, as well as NetSuite. So as we've talked about, Avalara has identified, the need to be able to calculate and correct any of these overcharged, undercharged amounts when they do get those back from the vendor. So we've now, as mentioned, centralized this within AvaTax so that those real-time tax calculations can come in, and you can review those as needed in real time without having to collect. And as previously mentioned, maybe at the end of a quarter or the end of a month. And so this will give everyone a single repository to be able to go and review those transactions and see what adjustments, if any, that they need to make. Right. So when talking about accounts payable, there's a number of reasons that we felt we really needed to get ahead of this, and this needed to be a core functionality here with AvaTax and coinciding with all of our connectors here. So big one is we want to be able to catch errors right when they're seen. We don't want to have to catch them later. We also want to keep people doing the things that they need to do and not bogging them down with additional tasks and things that take them away from, possibly their productivity. And then also give everyone the ability to have more control over that self-assessment and have a better chance at maintaining that compliance with the state and regulatory agencies. And with that, being improving control over the self-assessment, also minimizing the liability for any kind of audit. You have all of that information in a central repository that's very easy to review and run reports and show any regulatory agency should that ever be a question or an issue. Okay, so the first one we'll look at here is the D365 Business Central. So what we've done is Avalara has now created the accounts payable entitlement. And so essentially what that is it's going to give you the ability to set up those settings, those consumer use settings within AvaTax, and again, be able to see those consumer use transactions in one central repository, run various reporting, and so forth. And so in the configuration within Business Central, you will actually be able to see where you have the accounts payable entitlement. So in the configuration screen, down near the bottom, you will see in the About AvaTax connector, AvaTax subscriptions, which in this case says 16. We've now given you the ability to click into that, and you should be able to see your AvaTax account payable entitlement. Now the question may be, how do I get the AvaTax accounts payable entitlement? That'll be something you want to talk with your account manager on, just to make sure that they do have that set up for you so that you have that access. But if you do have that access, then you should be able to see it right here in your subscriptions entitlement section. Now, a key thing to note here is you still will see a couple of settings such as auto accrual and threshold amount in the configuration screen. We left this here for our legacy users. So people who are currently using that without having the accounts payable entitlement at this point, but were previously using it, we wanted to make sure they were still able to set these settings here in the configuration page. If you are new user and have signed up for the accounts payable entitlement, these will be non-functional. They will just be grayed out for you. But again, if you're a legacy user, these fields are not going away. You will still have access to those fields. So as we talked about with the SAP for HANA, what we've been able to do is we've been able to, once you have received your invoice from your vendor, you create your invoice there within Business Central, at which point tax will be returned on whatever the jurisdiction is that you're looking to have tax calculated on. in Business Central, we use statistics to run the AvaTax portion of that tax calculation, at which point we will provide messaging letting you know whether you have been undercharged or overcharged based on the current tax information that's been provided on the invoice and then the AvaTax calculation. So here we can see a vendor charged $1.80, AvaTax calculated $8.28 for an undercharge of $6.48. Right now, once you click OK here, within that invoice statistics page, you now have the ability to come down, and we can see here in our red box here, you now have the ability to change these fields within the invoice. So as mentioned previously, let's say they only charged us, you know, a little bit on the county and the city tax, but those are not proper tax amounts. You can actually change these to the amounts that you needed. Now, one of the things to just always be careful with on this is make sure you do have your general ledger settings to allow you for the variance that's allowed. So for example, you may have it set to $10, which means you may not be able to change that tax for more than $10. And if you need to, you just need to make sure that that setting is up to date. Okay. At which point you will be, once the tax is changed, once the tax is changed, you will be able to see the new difference in tax, if there is any, and you will be able to post that invoice. Once that invoice is posted, as we talked about earlier with the AvaTax Central repository for consumer use, you'll be able to see that transaction within the AvaTax portal, which you will also be able to see the breakdown of any tax accrued, tax charged, and vendor tax charged, AvaTax calculated and vendor tax charged. So you'll be able to see the full breakdown of all the tax. AvaTax will let you know the status of that, whether it was ignored, if tax was the same and there was no need for any accrual. It'll identify if tax was accrued, and it'll also identify if tax was overcharged. So you'll be able to see that breakdown there within the AvaTax portal. And Business Central will also is accommodating this for the tax code mapping, as well as tax group mapping. So those tax codes will still continue to come over into the AvaTax portal. And one of the things to also consider is with the AvaTax Accounts Payable entitlement, within AvaTax, you will now, that is where your new consumer use tax settings will live. So in this case, we need to set a variance amount or an accrual threshold or an amount threshold to ignore. Those settings are set up in AvaTax, and in the new Business Central Accounts Payable functionality will accommodate whatever settings that you had set up there within AvaTax. Right, moving on to NetSuite One World. So it is going to operate very, very similarly. In NetSuite, we've given you the ability to, on the purchase invoice, do the initial tax from the vendor, as you can see here from the line item. And instead of statistics in NetSuite One World, we use verify tax. So upon clicking that, you will see what the AvaTax calculated use tax was, what the vendor charge tax was, and similar messaging. Would you like to accrue the $3.20 on self-use tax? At which point you will then be able, you will be able to adjust that tax just as you did in the Business Central. So upon clicking that verify tax, you'll be able to adjust any taxes that might have been charged by the vendor, at which point, again, our system will let you know if there's been an over, under, or same calculated tax. And just as with Business Central, you'll be able to see those transactions and the breakdown of those within the AvaTax portal. Right, so I will hand it back over to Scott
Yeah. Thanks, Logan. Appreciate the download, and thank you, Frank and Greg and others. So we really appreciate it. Obviously, you guys can see our focus on AvaTax Accounts Payable. This is something that has come from the community on how we set it up initially and how we should fold it into the AvaTax API. And that's why we continue to build it into the integration functionality that you all use. And we love to hear your feedback. And then finally, to close it out, I always like to kind of show what we have planned going into 2024 Q2 launches. I know a lot of our teams are in big room planning, like I said, with Angela, and why Logan stepped in. So thanks again. Here's a couple of the main ones that are coming out. We're integrating AvaTax VAT Calc with VAT reporting. So this will help in regards to returns and VAT reporting, make it more of a seamless work stream. We also will have an Acumatica ECM integration launch. This ECM integration is included in Acumatica R1 that is currently in beta and will officially launch, I believe it's on March 28th or around that time. So it will be more GA'd this kind of the end of this quarter. And then also we will be launching an ATR for government, and what that is Avalara Tax Research, but specifically kind of to the government and public sector. And so that will help in becoming a popular product across kind of different industries. And then the Salesforce Sales Cloud cross-border. So we're going to enable the functionality. You all know that if you work with us on the Salesforce side, on the App Exchange, we have 9 different apps on the different clouds. This will be on the Sales Cloud app, and it's implementing the cross-border functionality. And that came directly from the Salesforce partner community. And then the last couple are VAT returns extractor for NetSuite Basic, OneWorld, and within SuiteTax. And then lastly, this launch here is related to a couple of our acquisitions over the last couple of years. It deals with Avalara trade compliance and also Avalara cross-border tariff content. And what that is providing the content, the 10-digit codes automatically and streamlining that process in regards to cross-border compliance. And with that, that is it. And we thank you for joining us quarterly on this journey. We will have our next one probably in early June, around that time frame. At that point, we'll also talk about Avalara Next, which will happen in the September timeframe. I'll have dates where in regards to that, and we'll share that. But wanted to say thanks one last time for being valued partners, and feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks, everyone.